game, relations with ourselves, the world around us, and the greater universe, finding our way back home.
Hello and welcome. And I'm coming back to you on the subject of ABE and the ABE communications, and specifically on the subject of the reality game. Coming back to this book, The Reality Game, Relations with Ourselves, the World Around Us, and the Greater Universe. I haven't come back to ABE for a while. I've been putting out some of my own essays. And as a friend recently mentioned, they gave me a nudge and they said, is ABE coming back? Because they said they liked the simplicity of the ABE communications. And so do I. In fact, one of the aspects that I enjoy working with is that I kind of like moving between the different styles or the mediums. And some of my own work, I suppose, is more, you may say, head-based, more intellectual, more complex, idea with ideas and philosophical ideas. And what I like about the ABE work, because it's not the core of the ABE messages, the communications are not from me. They are received by my friend Nicola, and she passes them on to me, and I write commentaries about them. And I do find the ABE very kind of direct and quite. Sometimes it may be hard to get around their wording and their phraseology, but actually their messages are very simple when you get down to them. It's all about disentangling ourselves and finding our way back home, coming back to the self. So I find them, they're a good kind of, they relate well with other stuff that I'm doing, and I think they play their part. And not everybody relates to ABE, but that's fine. We all relate to different types of frequency of information, frequency of input. So after my last few essays, which were more complex, I'm coming back to the reality game. And so far, I'm still reading from section 4 about relations with the greater universe. And where we are, and I think it fits in very well, in a kind of synchronous way, is that ABE talked about how we are caught up in vibrational interference. And it's kind of a contamination, a contaminating noise. And especially, I mean, I think even though these were received a few years ago, into 2019, beginning of 2020, the vibrational noise externally has increased a lot in the last few months alone. And we have to catch our rhythm again, says ABE. And we have to be more aware, because that's how we can discontaminate ourselves from this vibrational interference. And we have to be aware of something. We then can make a choice to disengage or disentangle from it. But without that awareness, we don't perceive this entanglement. And we have to kind of keep an open line to nurture the correct frequency. And ABE says, quote, "If you are but continuing to look down at your feet, then how do you expect to see the beauty in where you are going?" Very simple phrase, that. If you are but continuing to look down at your feet, then how do you expect to see the beauty in where you are going? Of course, if our direction of attention is at the feet, we don't see the beauty, we don't see the other things. And that's indicative of the idea that if we are being distracted or influenced to put our attention in a certain direction, then we miss so many other things. And especially we miss the positive. If our attention is on the negating influences or the noise or the negative aspects of life, we do miss the beauty. And it's just a case of shifting our perceptive vision. And again, if we put everything into one place only, then we become lopsided. And Abe talks about that in terms of the intellect. He says, you think if you do so concentrate in the head, you will see, you will get something. But the more you strain, the less you see, for you are but directing it in one certain place, and this is not true. Um, and Abe talks about how all our lives, different aspects of life, is kind of like splitting us all up. And so I think that's why I enjoy the Abe, because it takes me away from just, the intellectual work that I do as well. And that's why I enjoy writing, the books that I do, and the fiction and the science fiction I do. Because I think it kind of like takes in different areas. And Abe is right there that it's not just in the head. And we have a mind body togetherness, wholeness. And some people feel and think more through the body, some more through the head, but we can combine them. But I think Abe is right that if you're just straining, the more you strain, the less you see. If we put our perspective into one point only, I only want to work from the head, I only want to work from the emotions, I only want to work from this or that, then we strain more to go to that point. And if you go to that point, it's at the detriment of the others. So we shouldn't so strain, but try to kind of flow from different points in a more natural way. And if we are straining in certain points or pinpoints of perception, and we are putting all our investment of our awareness and energy into those certain particular pinpoints, then it's like we're conditioning ourselves to only taking information from one particular manner or medium, whether it's just we only kind of work with the emotions or the intellect. We can kind of create a blind spot. This is what social conditioning does. It programs or trains us to just adhere to one visionary line at the detriment of all the others. And if we remain heavily conditioned, then we may see something without perceiving it. And Abe says here, quote, you could see something, but still show a blind eye to it and shun it, for that is much easier to stay where you are. Is this not true? So we could see something, but still have a blindness to it. We see it, but we don't perceive it. And perhaps that's affecting a lot of us right now in life. We're seeing things, but we're not perceiving things because we shun it because it is much easier to stay but where you are. We shun something if it doesn't fit into our cognitive pattern because we find it easier to stay with what we know. And so we're cutting away influences or things that could be useful to us. Now I come to another point that Abe makes, which I find even more relevant now than when I first received it, because of the last few years. Abe is saying that humanity is entering a resting point. And at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, when these communications were received, it wasn't so understood what that meant. But I think in the last few years, especially, we can perhaps relate to that more. So what Abe is saying that sometimes we don't always have to push through energy. We don't have to force things because things come in rhythms, and sometimes the opposite is equally valid. We need to step back and perhaps do more inner work. So Abe has a point here. Abe says, quote, it is but time in your human species to go into this dip of this wave pattern. This is seen as the resting point, but really is not so, for much internal work can be done. The master looks as if he is not doing much in a day, but you see, he is but the physical manifestation of this dip. End quote. So it's like we're often consumed by action, consumed by the need to be doing something, when in fact, it may be necessary that we're in a dip or a resting period, and someone who's in the resting period and does it very well, like the master of some work, or when the apprentice is looking at the master and thinks the master's not doing much, but they're doing a lot because they're working through the resting or step back mode. And the rest periods are just as necessary as the active periods because they are more in sync with the rhythm of their time. And I think the important quote here for me is that the resting point is not really so for much internal work can be done. Just because it's a resting point, it's not a point of doing nothing. It means that the emphasis goes more onto the non-visible work, the internal work. So it's like the ebb and flow of certain rhythms across the planet, and these affect humanity and affect us individually in different ways, but we have to know when to kind of move with that. And it does seem like we're in a kind of resting point until we kind of recalibrate ourselves in a new arrangement. And this is what part of what Abe calls the way back home. We have to resync with ourselves. And I love this quote here, because Abe is saying, like, we've failed to realize that we already have a home, but we're always looking out of ourselves, the outer gaze, and we're looking on the outer home. Abe says here, quote, "But you can never but know what state your own home is in if you are but constantly sleeping on the sofas of others." I like the way that, very simple, very contemporary. You never know what state your own home is in if you are constantly sleeping on the sofas of others. We're sleeping in other people's homes because we're looking, thinking somewhere's better out there, but we're not finding our own home. And, and so we're not kind of syncing up with ourselves. I mean, if we can't sync up with ourselves as a human species, why are we thinking of going off into the cosmos as we are? We have to get our own home sorted out, our inner home. Another quote from Abe, quote, "You speak vibrationally and then you get a vibrational response. You just have to listen to that in which is the response and allow yourselves to reset, to create the new pathways." So, we're talking vibrationally in ways we may not realize. We're receiving responses vibrationally, but we're not listening. You just have to listen to that in which is the response and allow yourselves to reset, to create the new pathways. Allow ourselves to respond to that kind of inner resonance. And, don't get off the sofa of someone else's home and come back to your own. And again, to finish with, Abe says, you just don't realize your own potential. Quote, "It is all there. You but all have this potential. It's just that you are distracted and therefore your energy is splintered and you cannot comprehend it so well, for you have conflicting energies of outer influence." End quote. We have those conflicting energies of outer influence, which therefore distract us and splinter us and defragment us. Therefore, the coming home to ourselves is trying to regather our energies, bring them in, ground them, do the inner work, step back, because until we do that, then we're not in the best place. We're not in a good place to start putting ourselves out because we're still fragmented in ourselves. So I think some pertinent points there from the Abe communications, the way back home. So there's some more nudges, and perhaps in the upcoming times I will put out a few more from the reality game, volume 2 in the ABE commentaries. Thanks for listening. Be well, find your own inner path, find your rest period, and stay grounded. Cheers now.